Hello and welcome to episode 249 of Super Switch Headz, the premier Nintendo podcast on all of the internet. My name is Patrick Knisley.
My name is David Howe, and boy, oh boy, ladies and gentlemen, we have some very special guests that are going to be joining us today on this episode of the podcast. Returning to the show, old friend of the show, we got Michael Domangue on the show, and joining for the first time, you know him from the Discord, welcome Bozo to the show. How's it going, guys?
I am not a bozo, I am the bozo.
Yeah.
I am just a bozo who happens to be called Michael.
We've got some bozos in all their various forms on the show.
And we have these two bozos here. Okay, we're going to make that joke a bunch. We have y'all joining us this week to talk about emulation in light of what's happening with the settlement of the lawsuit between Nintendo and the makers of the Yuzu Switch emulator. We thought we'd talk about what is going on in the emulation scene right now and sort of that settlement, that lawsuit, and process all of that information. Plus, we've got some news. We are recording this show a little early for various scheduling reasons compared to when we normally do. So we might miss out on some news and have to cover it next week. So forgive us if there was anything big we missed. But we are going to talk about the Mario Day announcements because we did catch that. And we're going to talk about some other news, including, things continued to be shut down and pulled and studio closures. There's been a little bit of good news on some of that front with unionization. And then also pretty big icon has passed away, and we're gonna get into all of that in just a minute. But first, we're gonna just check in. How's everybody doing? How's everybody's week been? David, do you want to go first?
Yeah, it's going all right. I saw Dune 2 again last night. Dune 2 Round 2 at the Bob Bullock IMAX Theater. Had a really great time. This time really felt connected when they're tripping out in the in the desert. It was a very visceral, loud experience I felt in my entire body. Even better on the second round. So I definitely recommend checking that movie out. And then, yeah, I don't know, man. It's just been like a busy fucking week. It's been a lot of ups and downs, a lot of like stress and stuff like that. But the weekend so far has been like pretty chill. I'm taking tomorrow off too, and I'm going to see like a new short film from Don Hertzfeldt, who's one of my favorite animators. He's got a new short here in town, so I'm going to be checking that out. I'm excited. But yeah, how about y'all? How's your week?
I'm living a pretty boring life these days, not doing too much, but I did cut loose a little bit this weekend. Hung out with my cousin and hung out with my wife, and we. So I don't know, but I'm just really kind of living normal. This is spring break week coming up for my kid, though we put him in a camp, and man, I just feel like everybody's having the reaction that David just had, which is like
we're putting him in a camp. Doesn't sound like a great sentence to me.
Okay, well, maybe that's the bad phrasing, but some of his friends are going to Disney World or things like that, and he's doing a camp. I think it's going to be okay. But that's what's going on over here. What about you two?
I don't know if you guys remember, but I'm one of the members of the Lost Media Wiki who's doing the search for Super Smash Bros. Slamfest 99.
Yes,
I've been keeping busy with that lately. We found some good information. We got in contact with the webmaster of Zelda 64 Planet from like the 90s to see if they had any footage. They didn't, sadly.
But connections are made. You've been networking. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're still trying to identify the announcer. But we know a lot of the people who were in the costumes now, which is pretty sweet. And yeah, I don't know how many years that's going to go on, but we're trying our best.
Yeah,
that was keeping us busy.
When we talked about that on the podcast, and then you reached out, you're like, "Oh, I'm one of the guys that's like running it." It was very serendipitous whenever that happened before. So glad to have you on the show. Also, just shout out, I think it's very important for the internet to have historians and to track shit down that are really important. Because everything's so fleeting, and we rely on shit like archive.org and Wayback Machine and stuff, and it's like. It's a reminder of how fleeting the information age is. So God bless you for doing the important work out there.
Yeah, thanks. If you ever have a slow news week and want to talk about Slamfest 99, I'm more than happy to.
Oh, we'd love to. Yeah.
Today, I'll spoil. Today's Mario Day, and tomorrow's my birthday, so I turned 37. Looking forward to that.
Wow.
And then I am practically living in a lost media archive because I'm going to be at one of my favorite places up here to the Northeast, Best Video, which is a video store here in Connecticut, filled to the rafters with amazing things you can't find online and on streaming anymore. So love hanging out with those guys. I'll be doing some Oscar stuff with them, and just celebrating my birthday week.
Very good. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, happy birthday. Last week, we did an episode on Astro Duel 2. We had an interview with the developers of that, which was a great episode. You should check it out if you haven't already, but we got some great comments on that over on our Discord. Sewing Shade said Rusty and Jeff were great guests, and made a nice comment about us hosting as well. Real Tomato.
Thank you very much, Sewing Shade, for the very nice comment. Yeah.
Real Tomato enjoyed listening to me geek out, me Patrick, and went back and listened to some old episodes as well. And then the Huge 27. I love it when somebody does this. Thanks, the Huge, when they reference a small one-off joke in the episode. Said, "Damn, I can't believe it's been 10 years since y'all interviewed the Astro Duel 2 devs." You would have to listen to the episode to get that. Over on,
you had to be there.
You had to be there. Over on YouTube, we got a comment from Obviously Web. Said, "Really interesting. The devs brought up Spelunky as an inspiration because they're a huge fan of Spelunky and in the emergent gameplay that comes from it. And when they were playing Astro Duel 2, they noticed that same emergent gameplay kind of inspiration." Drew Musil, who said the podcast sold them on the game and they picked it up and they're enjoying bounty mode and how it becomes increasingly fleshed out the more you play it. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Wild Rooster, where's our cut? Where's our cut of that sale?
That's one sale. So, yeah, if we talk about anything on today's episode regarding emulation or any of the news and you've got a comment, definitely leave it somewhere or send us a DM and we'll try to shout you out next time. We do appreciate when folks share the podcast with a friend or review it or post it on Reddit. We've got a Patreon now. So if you want to support the show, you can head on over to Patreon, find Super Switch Headz and support it. And then also, if you're not watching the video version, do us a favor and pop over to YouTube and hit like and subscribe.
Bunch of handsome boys on this episode. You'd be missing out.
Yeah, that's right. We're going to talk about the news this week, and we're going to open it up with Mario Day, March 10th. That's today, the day we are recording this. This has become a thing, right? Nintendo has embraced March 10th as Mario Day.
Real May the 4th energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And leading up to actual March 10th, they've been doing a variety of things, actually, and putting a bunch of the Mario or Mario-related games on sale. They're currently on sale on the Switch, I want to say, for another week or so. So if there's a Mario game on the Switch you want to pick up, maybe it's a good time. And they made announcements about new Lego sets. I don't know if anybody's excited about this here. We don't have to talk about it much if you are. Oh, Dodo, I see you nodding your head. What you got?
I got a Piranha Plant Lego set here at the house. So yeah, I'm always down for a nice Lego set.
Nice. Yeah, they got the Bowser train.
Bowser train. The Princess Peach's castle looks pretty good. It's more of like what we were talking about last week with Jeff, right? It's like those
modular
architecture.
Yeah.
They're like they're like little buildings and stuff.
Yes.
They're like little sets for you to move your minifigs around on, rather than like full builds. They also announced at the very end of that video they're doing a Mario Kart set that's coming out in like 2025, I think they said. So they're really forecasting this one out there. But it looks like it's little cars that you can put the Mario that has the Teletubby belly or whatever, his Teletubby face. I don't know. The one that has video on him. You can put him inside a car. So that's exciting for fans.
I missed that detail, actually. Thank you for pointing it out. That is funny. There's a lot of far off announcements being made about Mario stuff.
So Super Switch is going to be Lego compatible, and it has to release with the new system.
Lego Amiibos would be dope. That's all I'm going to say.
I can't believe it doesn't already exist.
It does. It was Lego Dimensions.
Oh, okay, there you go. Yeah.
They put out a short video on Mario Day here with a couple of announcements focusing heavily on a new Mario movie, which is coming out in 2026. So we all have a couple of years to look forward to that. Is that an early announcement? Does that feel too early to announce?
if they were teasing a teaser, I feel like that would be, more appropriate. But just saying, hey, it's coming, mark it on your calendars. That's the new thing with movies these days, staking out those calendar dates well in advance.
Yeah. Hollywood is not like the games industry in that when something, you can make a game in secret and then reveal it 2 months before release. And they're like, oh my God, this is coming out. Like everybody knows every movie that's being produced at all times, basically. Like that's all public knowledge. So it's like having this is essentially acted as a press release from Nintendo being like, and Illumination being like, this is continuing. We're working with Universal again. This is what we have blocked out. This is the release date. The marketing push will be at this time. So it's all like very also like just investor centric and everything. Movies just work different. I'm glad to hear, obviously, that we have confirmation that a sequel is coming. We all knew it was going to be happening, but having a date is nice. I'll be there.
Yeah, so we got to see Chris Meledandri, of course, talk in this video, which we all wanted, right? This is what we thought of when you thought of Mario Day, right?
I fucking love Meledandri, man. I love him. I love his big bald head.
As Pioro predicted, we got some release dates for the upcoming Mario-related Switch games. The Paper Mario, the 1,000-Year Door remake is coming out in May 23rd. And Luigi's Mansion 2 HD is coming out in June 27th. So that kind of fills out Nintendo's first half of the year.
Except for April. There's nothing for April currently, right? Do you think we'll get some kind of announcement, shadow drop, some sort of, is that where they slot like a Metroid Prime 2 remaster? Maybe they shadow drop the first one, right? Maybe there's some kind of, seems like they're not doing a direct, sorry, I'm kind of just rambling.
You're good.
But it seems like they're not really doing a direct, like a standard direct around this time because they've been dropping so much shit just on Twitter. I just wonder if do you guys think of anything that might be dropping in April?
Prime 2 makes the most sense, like in terms of just like sort of lining up one after the other. I feel like there may just not be anything in April and they're saving up for that, post-mortem E3 spot to sort of lay out what's going to be happening in the fall and winter. So I think at this point, since we're all just so hungry for Super Switch news, that I think either that would fill up an announcement gap or something else.
I'm on the no April game train because I think Endless Ocean's like May 2nd or something, and then Paper Mario May 23rd. I think that's kind of I don't know, why they didn't do that a little differently. I don't know, but
not that I'm complaining. I mean, there are like so many indie releases and third-party releases out right now that I haven't even picked up yet, just because I'm still working my way through a bunch of games. So it's like there's no shortage of games currently that are brand new to play. So they could take their time, but I wouldn't be surprised to see something announced and released in April.
The final bit of news out of this, again, very short, which was kind of strange, like bam, 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 release date thing here, was 3 Mario Game Boy or Game Boy Color games coming to the NSO service. It's Dr. Mario, which we already had on the NES app, but this is the Game Boy version. I love that these games get, like their own, like, ooh, it's another version.
Yeah, with the lack of color now, so it's even more fun.
Even harder to tell what to do. Mario Tennis and Mario Golf. I don't know that I played. I think I played Mario. I actually definitely played Mario Tennis on the Game Boy, but I don't think I played the Mario Golf Game Boy game.
These are the RPGs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mario Sports RPGs.
Yeah, these are both really excellent, like fully fledged sports RPGs. Both of these games are kind of the main inspiration for like Golf Story and Sports Story, which came out recently. These are awesome games. It's a great blend of Camelot's two skills, which is, kind of turn-based RPGs or battle-based RPGs and sports games. Both classics. I wish that we also got the Game Boy Advance versions of both of these because I think that those are superior, but the Game Boy Color versions are also just as good, if that's the only thing you have to play. Also, now that these two games are out, Nintendo will find you and hunt you down if you emulate these two Game Boy Color games on any device other than a Switch. It is now morally illegal to emulate these games now that they are available.
They are available.
Excuse me, guys. I gotta make that stop.
No, but in all seriousness, these are really great releases, and if you haven't played these before, this is a really good opportunity to do so.
Also, we didn't talk about this, but it's a Sunday, March 10th, Mario Day. Kind of weird that they made an announcement on a Sunday. I feel like this just shows they're really leaning in to this Mario Day thing, and we could maybe expect that to always, in the future will continue to be a day for like Mario news.
When did that start?
That's a good question.
I mean, they weren't always doing this on March 10th.
The last 5-6 years, it feels like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a natural Barbenheimer style phenomenon that is just like people are like, hey, look, it looks like the thing. And then someone at Nintendo marketing is like, why aren't we taking advantage of this? And then it's like takes them a number of years to get their ducks in a row. And now they're doing it on Sundays.
Yeah. I feel like that's what it is, right? Like they've been, I don't know. I kind of agree with you, Michael. There's probably been 5 or 6 years since they've started doing it, but like, it's increasing. And this feels like the most, not that, these are all things we knew about it or the movie, not so much, but yeah.
I do have one more Mario Day thing that I want to push on people. And because they've announced the Mario sequel, I have this lying around the house. I got this the other day. This is the Trust the Fungus edition of the 1993 Super Mario Brothers movie. The folks at Umbrella, I just want to say, like, there's a standard edition out there. If you want to see currently the best Mario Brothers movie in 4K. There, I said it. Go grab that. Really celebrate Mario Day with John Leguizamo and Bob Hoskins.
Dude, I am beside myself with envy. I didn't buy it because I was like, oh man, $150 shipped from Australia. I was like, that's a bridge too far. And now that everybody has it and it's out of print, I'm like, where the fuck didn't I get that? I'm like kicking myself because it looks like such a nice collection. I'm happy for you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we're going to move on to some sad news. And this is that Akira Toriyama has passed away. A manga artist and involved in games as well. And that's partly why we're talking about it, but most notably known for Dragon Ball, right? But also worked in games, in particular the Dragon Quest series and Chrono Trigger. And I'm sure I'm missing some stuff. I mean, it's been interesting to see because I think a lot of people like Dragon Ball, right? Or like there's a lot of like...
if his impact was only Dragon Ball, it'd still be one of the biggest impacts in terms of culture, both so US true. And Japan. Like if it was just that. But for me personally, as not a Dragon Ball fan, Chrono Trigger is one of my top 5 games of all time. My mouse pad right here is the campfire scene from Chrono Trigger. Like... his artwork touched me in those ways. So it is definitely a sad passing. And I think a lot of people are coming out of the woodwork to let folks know what his work has meant to them over the years.
This is one of those, when someone dies and they're like, rest in peace, legend, or like he was a Titan, like he was, like this dude, like, it's kind of, I would say Goku and just his character style of drawing faces and the way he drew his characters. I feel like that is as universal as Mickey Mouse or Mario, and it spawned so many inspirations, like on Twitter. Basically my timeline is animation Twitter and video games Twitter. So for basically 48 hours, it was just a wall of everyone mourning and being like, there is no person alive now who makes action or anime or whatever that wasn't in some way influenced by Akira Toriyama. So it's a huge earth-shattering loss, and we underestimate the power of Dragon Quest and the sheer power of that franchise, especially in Japan, and what the kind of influence that had on gaming worldwide, and what a huge part in the formation of that franchise Akira Toriyama was as well. So repping the Capsule Corporation hat today and this week for Akira Toriyama, and it's sad to see one of the greats go.
Well, we'll move on, and we're kind of shifting back to Nintendo here for a second, and that is going to be that Princess Peach Showtime has been given the demo treatment. So this game's coming out in like a week and a half, or give or take. I tried it out. Is anybody else here actually pick this up and try it out?
Yeah, I played the demo. Did you guys play it?
Yeah, I mean, I liked it. I don't think it's my cup of tea personally, but I mean, I could see kids enjoying it. I think it feels like the same niche a Kirby game does, and that's totally cool. And I'm glad that Princess Peach has her own IP now to work with, and probably on the surface at least, it probably is better than Super Princess Peach on DS, but maybe that's a bit of a reach. I don't know.
Or a low bar. I don't know. Like it's
it's a pretty low bar, and if I'm honest, I'll just talk about my impressions of this demo right now. I don't think it's like either matching it or below for me. It's I was not taken by this demo. We're going to be doing an episode on this game. I'll have a chance to play the full game. I'm looking forward to trying it further past the first 2 levels, because it really feels like this is a game made for babies. This is like a 5 to 6 year old level game is what
you
it feels like.
or underestimate kids' abilities. I think sometimes as somebody with a kid, like I think this is like perfect for my kid. Like he loves it.
Sure.
Like
but your kid is also a kid. Like is what I'm talking about.
Right. But like I think this is made for a little older than what you just said. The range.
I disagree, because there's one button in this game, and you can just press that one button, and you'll win the game. Like there's nothing to it, that's just me personally. I enjoyed the patisserie Peach section of the demo more than I liked the sword fighter Peach. I did not like that dodge and sword were the same button, or maybe dodge was jump or whatever. And it's just oversimplified, I think, to a point where it feels clunky, right? It doesn't feel responsive. It feels like you press a button and that triggers an animation, rather than what you're doing on screen is tied to your inputs, right? And then on top of that, while the game is beautiful, it's got pretty bad performance problems, and it's definitely running sub 30 frames per second on a lot of this. And that is not what you normally see in a Mario game on the Switch, right? So not that performance is everything. I found it to be visually enticing. I was streaming it, and when I was, everybody was like, this looks really cool. And I'm like, yeah, but it doesn't feel good. What she's doing flashy stuff, but it doesn't like feel good to play. And that was just me personally. I think maybe if the game gets a little more complicated later on, or I like some of the other styles of mini games more than these, I might be more taken with it. But that was my initial impression.
Yeah, I think I agree. The performance is kind of bad. There's some really long loading. I don't know. Did y'all have that experience? Like going in and out of the segments was kind of like especially for a first party game, right? Like
especially when all the characters are made up of like 3 spheres. That's it. It's like, really? Where's the loading time coming in?
Obviously, I think this is for kids, and like so, judging the difficulty is hard. I will say though, at least from watching my son play it mostly, I did have some of the same vibes when I did kind of like jump around as Peach, to be like, this doesn't feel quite like how I want Peach to jump and float and stuff.
They could have made it to where it was fun to jump around and move around, and that would have made the like long stretches between time that anything is going on feel better, because they'd just be jumping around and stunting and stuff, and you just can't do any of that. And so it's just kind of a little dull. Yeah.
I think the variety will be cool of all the different outfits and areas you can go into, because the sword fighting really is so different than the chef or whatever it's called. Patisserie. I can't say that word.
Patisserie. And I know that because I watched the Great British Baking Show.
Yes.
It's Patisserie Week.
But yeah, this is out there, so everyone should check it out if you're interested in this game or you got kids, because I think that's where it's going to hit. And before we move on from this too, data mining is suggesting that Goodfeel is the developer of this game. If you don't know who Goodfeel is, I didn't really know either, but they have done a lot of work on Nintendo games, actually. They've made a few, I think they got their start in like educational games.
It's the Kirby's Epic Yarn devs and Yoshi's Crafted World. And so they've made really good games in the past that I've really liked, but they are always kind of on the easier side.
Yeah. So we'll move on to talking about profile icons, because there's going to be some Princess Peach Showtime Switch profile icons. Recently, they have added a few games, or just kind of mixed up how you're able to get these profile icons on their Switch. You have to be an NSO subscriber, and that's always been the case. And then you could just go into the NSO app and get them. But now, at least for some, it's weird because it's not like universal. But for some, you actually have to play the game. And like for Super Mario World, you have to actually like fire up the game once. Now they added Super Mario World icons. And then now for like Animal Crossing and stuff like that, you have to like played it 3 times within the last 30 days to get the icons.
With 24 hours in between each play
yes.
session. Yeah.
So
weird, dude. It's
weird.
Why are they doing that? It feels like NFTs, kind of. It's like they're giving the digital goods like more value than they actually have by your time commitment, I guess. I don't know. It's weird.
And I feel like this could be a good way to sort of shoehorn achievements into it by setting it to goals in the game.
Yeah.
Like saying getting a certain amount of bells in Animal Crossing, but playing it on 3 days, 24 hours apart seems a chore rather than an achievement.
Yeah. I don't know. I kind of get the Mario World one. I don't think it should be this way. And it's weird because there's Earthbound ones right now where you don't have to do anything. You can just go get the Earthbound ones. So
Is that the case? So here's my, do you have to have played Mother 3 in order to get them in the Japanese one? I know they've made it hard to, like, you can't just switch your location and get the Mother 3 ones. But I'm wondering if they put this in so that Americans couldn't get Mother 3 ones even if they wanted to. Like there's like a really being like, fuck you.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there because I don't remember the details, and I read somewhere that someone had a Mother 3 icon. They like switched their region somehow, but then switching back to their local region, I think it just like crashes the Switch.
Yeah, and then
it's searching for the files in a directory that doesn't exist for that region on the Switch or something.
And that's not to mention that they had to settle out of court with Nintendo for $2.4 million. So it's really worth it for the Mother 3 icons.
Man, I think it's just strange to like have something available for, I don't know how long they've been doing these icons, right? It's been a couple years maybe. And then just be like, we're going to now make it where you have to play the games. And that kind of makes sense. But it also, this is already a part of a paid service little bonus thing where you have to earn points through doing things. Just like dumb. And it's not universal. It's different for each thing. Oh, okay, we'll move on. But very Nintendo decisions going on with these profile pics. We're going to move on to talking about some broader industry stuff. Over at Microsoft and at Activision, a bunch of QA workers have unionized, or that is that Microsoft has recognized the unionization of these QA workers over at Activision. It's the biggest video game union so far in the United States. Qualification there. And I guess this is interesting too, is reading the Polygon article that you shared, David, about this. And they said, I guess that Microsoft has essentially signed like a neutrality agreement with one of the big labor like negotiating what the CWA so that if there's ever a union there, they won't like bust it basically, or if there's ever people trying to unionize, they won't do anything. So Microsoft workers unite, right?
Yeah, if history serves me correct, like this sort of announcement that Microsoft made was when Activision had sort of unions being formed, but before Microsoft acquired Activision, they said that they would not dispute, certification or anything like that. So they wouldn't get in the way of unions being formed. And obviously that both helped them in their regulatory issues getting Activision, but I also just think it's a good step to take because I don't see it being a bad thing for more unionization in the video game space.
Yeah, I think it also, again, if I could be a little cynical here, just as somebody who is currently going through the negotiating process after being voluntarily recognized, but has yet to have that formed. I do think too that being so upfront about like, yeah, we'll voluntarily recognize you. We're not going to block unions. We're not going to blah, blah, blah. Also kind of is a bit of an insulation for them to continue layoffs without being like, hey, these layoffs against people that are currently ongoing are not union busting. But we can fire who we need to, So I wouldn't be surprised if all of these workers under CWA that are currently organizing, a lot of them end up getting laid off during this process, and I think it's kind of a bit of a way to insulate them against bad press there. That's me being very cynical. Let's talk about the good news. This is awesome, and regardless, very, very happy to see it. I love that this is big. This is 600 people. And that, I think with CWA now, it's like there is a quality, I forget exactly what CWA stands for here, but it is like QA
communication or something like that, right?
Yeah. But it's like the QA testing specific one. So hopefully there can be, more people under this umbrella outside of Activision as well. We can start to see movements for industry-wide union practices happening. So that's great to see. And yeah, I really hope that they get what they deserve in negotiations, and I'll be pulling for them.
Moving to something that's local for David and I. This is kind of sad news, right? Or it's definitely sad news. Rooster Teeth has been shut down. Rooster Teeth is a big sort of media gaming entity here in Austin that is well known for, what's the name of the anime? RW
Ruby.
Yeah, Ruby, and Red versus Blue. That's like such their history, right? Like Red versus the Halo videos. I have like mixed feelings about Rooster Teeth, right? Like I know a lot of ex-Rooster Teeth people, and like it's such a big creative force. And I know so many people and I know y'all do too, like in the comedy community that have been employed by Rooster Teeth. So this sucks that so many people are going to lose their jobs, but I know the place has had some problems too. So not that.
Yeah. I was hanging out with a bunch of ex-Rooster Teethers last night, and yeah, like you said, people have mixed feelings. Like it's awful to see the studio close and a bunch of people lose their jobs, and especially awful to see Austin production jobs flatlining, right? And this, I think, we're going to see more of this. Layoffs are happening. It's easy to forget that they're happening in all industries outside of games right now, especially entertainment industries. So this is just terrible to see. But I mean, also, everyone I know that left hated the place, for very good reasons. So I do know that right now their podcasting network, The Roost, I believe it's called, is still running. They have a lot of big, high-profile podcasts under there. I know H3 is under that, and I think Theo Vaughn's podcast, right? So they have a bit of time to see if they're going to be bought. Otherwise, that will also be shut down. But this is a Warner Brothers thing. Warner Brothers owns Rooster Teeth. This is another Zaslav decision. There is no Satan dick big enough for Zaslav to suck in hell. I can say that. Fucking hate that guy. So praying for that day when that eventually comes. So we'll talk more about Zaslav and his horrible decisions here shortly. But yeah, really sad to see.
Okay.
I'm just someone in a job hunt right now. I'm trying to remember if I have any application with Warner Brothers at the moment before I say anything.
Yeah. It's a minefield. It's a minefield out there. But yes. I think I'm safe shitting on fucking Zaslav. I think I'm safe shitting on Zaslav and Embracer Group for any kind of networking or potential job opportunities that may come my way. And if not, I'll die on that hill. Fuck it.
Yeah. Integrity is good too. I don't know a whole lot about this, so maybe somebody else can explain, but Sony has apparently put up and by accident and pulled down the Stellar Blade demo. When did this happen? And it was an accident, right?
I think so. It was yesterday. It went up and a lot of people downloaded it right away. It was like Wario64 posted about it. A bunch of people downloaded it and started playing it. And then Sony pulled it like 40 minutes later and then pulled the digital copy from people that had already downloaded it. So you couldn't access it even if you'd already downloaded it. So I thought that kind of lent into some of our emulation and game preservation talk that we'll be having a little bit later. Also, I just wanted to put this in the news because I find it funny that this, along with so many other things, has people being like, look, guys, games finally aren't woke. It's like there's a woman with like a big booty and the creator of the game is like, we made her sexy on purpose because you're looking at her, and everyone's like, wokeness in games is finally dead. And I just find that topic of conversation really strange. It makes me wonder if we've lost the sauce on what woke even means.
A long time ago.
People
we never knew
about.
We never knew what it meant.
Yeah. There's been a whole thing around Sweet Baby too, which we don't have to get into, but that also ties into that conversation.
Yeah, Sweet Baby Games or whatever.
Yes.
That is like a consulting firm for AAA games that everybody's really mad at them because they think they're wokeifying the industry or whatever.
Right.
Oh man, I hesitate to even talk about this too much on the fucking show.
Yeah.
But it's like, I don't know. I've just found that we're on the cusp, I think, of this weird Gamergate 2.0 sort of movement with that. It's all like weird Discord warriors fighting against each other right now on both sides. So if the gaming news gets super insufferable in the next like couple months, that's what's happening. Just heads up, everybody.
It's not like
feeling that the Sweet Baby, what they actually do is probably a lot more mundane than what people are thinking. It's probably much more.
That's what I've heard.
Not like de-wokeifying, but more just. This is not just outright offensive.
No, they are funded by George Soros, backed by Brian Epstein, and I'm trying to make it as tinfoil hat as possible here.
No, to that point, Bozo, I actually did see somebody do an explanation like that. Like, I don't think y'all understand what this company does. And yes, exactly what you're saying, right? Like, but that's where we're at in terms of polarization.
Yeah.
So
anyway, I put in the Stellar Blade demo stuff so I could sneak in this conversation before we move into the main topic.
Well, the last bit of news we have here is also very related to our main topic and to what we were just talking about a minute ago with Rooster Teeth. And that is that apparently all Adult Swim games are going to be delisted. Is this is everywhere? Like, or on,
at least on Steam. Yeah, but I think on all digital platforms, including consoles, where a lot of Adult Swim games are PC only, but I think the ones that are console only are also being delisted on those platforms.
There's a lot of these games, right? I don't, has Adult Swim Games been making games recently? I don't know a lot about their recent work. I know more of like I don't know, like mobile games. I remember playing Adult Swim games. Like when
the last article I read on this said, I think it was 21-22 where they stopped publishing games. So it's been a few years. I think probably would have been closer to around the time AT&T came into the space that they stopped.
Gotcha.
Right. And now it's Warner Brothers Discovery, and they're probably just like, why are we still doing this? They're doing right now what Bob Iger did back when they took over Fox and Lucasfilm and shut down LucasArts and all the gaming division stuff. And then now Bob Iger is like saying he regrets it. But now Warner Brothers is doing that. It just doesn't make sense. Warner Brothers keeps taking L after L here. After Suicide Squad killed the Justice League, they're like, we're still doubling down on live service. And it's like, did you not just see what just happened? And this decision, like removing any kind of like independent funding and venture stuff, it's just bad news.
It's just strange. I imagine there must be a reason for this, but like if you have a game up on Steam, it's not costing you much money, right? Like I'm guessing that dealing with receiving these funds and pushing them out, I don't know, they don't want to do it anymore. What's the reason for?
I don't know that they've said officially the reason. I think we only know this because individual developers have come out and said, my game is being delisted. And then it's like all the Adult Swim games, like umbrella published developers, right? Like for instance, Small Radios, Big Televisions is one of the games that's being delisted. And the creator of that game on Twitter was like, hey, this is getting delisted. I made a website and I put it up for free. Go download it. You know what I mean? So it's like, hopefully more people do that. I think that's awesome. Like Duck Game is another one on here. That's like an awesome multiplayer game akin to like Astrodual 2, like we had the devs on last week. But if I am guessing, this would be another Zaslav, like write off, depreciate your assets for a tax write-off sort of thing. It's like you have to pay for licensing to keep things up on services in some ways. And if you don't, like if that has run out and you just have them up on these platforms, still taking it away from your inventory of owned assets means less taxes that you have to pay on everything at the end of the year. We've been seeing this happen with, obviously Coyote versus Acme being the most recent movie. We talked about that a lot on Super Film Heads, and Batgirl and stuff like that. So this is no new practice. I think it's just now kind of moving into games, if I had to guess.
My only question with this is regards to the rights to the games. I imagine in most of these, the creators were, gain back the rights to the games, because one of the list is a game called Headlander, which was made by Double Fine. Like, that's a Double Fine game that is now going to be completely gone. And does Microsoft not have the ability to take it back and put it on Game Pass? I'm questioning, are these going to end up being, lost media or lost games?
Well, it depends on if Warner Brothers wants to sell them. It might be more beneficial for them to take the write-off than to sell them back to the rights owners. It's ridiculous.
On this article we have here, which is from delistedgames.com, it even talks about one of the developers of one of these games asked that Warner Brothers transfer the game to their Steam publisher account, and they said no. And that they have made the universal decision not to transfer the games back to the original studios and do not have the resources to do so, is the quote in this article. So
that's a real Zaslav move, dude. That's like what he does. That's like what he's known for. Yeah. Fuck that fucking guy, man. I hate him so goddamn much. He is my enemy.
Well, there is exactly the kind of reasoning for our main topic of emulation, right? Games being pulled, even for people who want, like developers who want to not have them pulled, and stuff like that. So with that, we're going to round out the news and we're going to take a short break. And when we come back, we're going to be talking all about emulation in light of the recent Yuzu lawsuit. We are back, and this week we are talking about the state of emulation. So as we discussed last week, there was a settlement to the Nintendo versus Tropic Haze, the Yuzu Switch emulation creators, rather large amount, and that they agreed in their agreed judgment of damages, and also turning over all the code and all that kind of stuff to Nintendo. And so as a result of that, there's been a few things that have happened, right? So we're going to get into that and kind of then speculate about what this means and what's going on with emulation. So yeah, we have Michael Domangue and Bozo on because y'all have been kind of discussing this in our Discord and sharing some facts and some various things. So we thought y'all would be great people to come help talk with us about this. Anybody want to take it away and kind of maybe explain what's been happening with some of these other emulators and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I could give you a rundown. So I just want to preface this by saying I'm not a lawyer. I'm just someone who's very concerned about the potential this case had for setting a new precedent for emulation. I'm someone who's very pro emulation. I've even contributed code to some of the Wii homebrew emulators myself. So it's a topic that hits home for me. I think like Nintendo had a very solid case going in, and on one hand, I'm not surprised that it ended with a settlement like this, and especially so quick. But on the other hand, I'm also a bit surprised that Nintendo didn't follow through to get this to court to potentially set a new precedent, a legal precedent. And that's really the part that was so troubling, was that had this precedent been set for a much more broader range of legal restrictions on what constitutes legal emulation, it would be very bad news for many, many other emulators than just Yuzu and Citra. So the fact that these two emulators are falling on the sword is actually probably ultimately a good thing for the rest of emulation, where we should be happy that this didn't go to trial.
Right. Yeah. And do you think that was purposeful on Nintendo's part? Do you think it was more important for them to make a splash in the court of public opinion here than in an actual court? Like, do you think that they wanted to do that, or because it's not like they don't have the funds to litigate this and take this to trial and draw it out. Like, right. Do you think that was a strategic move on their part?
Yeah, that's one part I'm wondering myself, is that, and I'd love to hear what a lawyer would have to say regarding Nintendo's angle.
I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but I worked as a paralegal for a long time, but I think trial is uncertain. There's always, it doesn't matter how good your case is, doesn't matter whatever, and I don't know if this was going to be a jury trial, if this was going to be a bench trial, and that's where a judge hears it. And sometimes that isn't even decided at this early in the case. depending on where it was and all. Anyway, but it's always uncertain, and so settlement is always better. And if they can get a settlement where Yuzu agree, I mean, 100% Nintendo's lawyers drafted that proposed judgment. Yuzu didn't come in and be like, what if we settled this and gave you everything you wanted? So like, I think
you had to think, because of how fast they buckled to, that they were like, yo, you're never going to get a better deal than this. Run with it, Yeah.
Well, yeah, because they could spend a ton of money and then still end up with that same settlement, or they could spend a ton of money and then end up with something worse. So I think your question is a great question, and I think that's probably right. I think it's probably like, we don't know if we'll win on any of these legal stuff. And I know, Michael, you mentioned some of, or maybe we can get into some of that stuff. But like, I think just real briefly, I think you're right, David. I think they were like, we can set a precedent outside of court and scare a bunch of people, right?
But we're already seeing the results of that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'll get into sort of the brief case law. Once again, I am not a lawyer, but
we're all lawyers. We all know exactly what we're talking about.
No, we're not.
if you want to go like way back in history to the 80s, when people started cloning the IBM PC, that is in some ways sort of the case law that was settled, that you can reverse engineer hardware as long as you're not using any proprietary information. Flash forward to the 90s, there was a case where Bleem went up Sony. Bleem was an emulator of the PlayStation, the original PlayStation. They actually had disc working on the Dreamcast where you could play PlayStation games.
I was a Bleemcast head.
There we go. But there was a legal opinion, there was a legal precedent set with that Bleem case, where once again, reverse engineering a console is legal. As long as you're not using anything that Sony owns, you can do that. In the case of Bleem, you didn't even need to provide a BIOS file in those cases to run it. Where emulation gets trickier now as we get further and further into the generations is you have to bring more to the table to get emulators to work than what you did in the earlier days. And this is where we get into decrypting and to the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, the idea of you have to do some decrypting on your end in order to play these pieces of software. So that's where things get tricky. And in the case of Yuzu, in the case of other Switch emulators, you have to have decryption keys on your emulator in order to run this software. And I think that's where Nintendo really had a case to go, is not only do you have to do decryption keys, but Yuzu was telling you exactly what you needed to do to get the decryption keys. So that is where you get into sort of facilitating piracy.
Sure. Yeah. And you brought up a great point as well, Bozo, in that if any of the emulators was going to fall on the sword, this is probably the best one. And that is true for so many reasons, right? I think chief among them, Switch is a current console. Obviously, we talked about this last week, but they had a Patreon and they would hold back certain releases of Yuzu for higher paid tiers. I think the main reason all this got kicked off was whenever Tears of the Kingdom came out, the version of Yuzu that could play that was held behind a paywall, right? Like the old version of Yuzu wouldn't run the newest Tears of the Kingdom before release, right? And then if you wanted it, you had to pay more, and then you could play Tears of the Kingdom before release. Led to 1 million downloads, at least according to Nintendo. Like that would raise anybody's eyebrows, right? Like that is not, I think, a thing where it's like, fuck Nintendo bad. They just want to see how emulation go. I think that's like a pretty tangible, you guys made money off of our stolen goods, or at least you could turn it into that in a court of law pretty easily.
Yeah, that brings up a couple interesting points from Nintendo's suit. Was they noted that Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition was playable, I think, a day before it launched, or the developers had made a blog post saying that it was fully playable in Yuzu a day before launch. So that brings the question, like, well, how were you able to do this with?
I pre-ordered it.
Piracy.
yeah. That was David from the future made a backup and sent it back in time. So that was a legally obtained copy.
Sorry to interrupt you, Bozo. I just had to make the joke.
But yeah. What Michael was saying about the cryptographic decryption and cryptographic keys is fundamental to this lawsuit, and I think anyone reading this is something you got to understand is that Well, this is the same reason that they C&D'd Dolphin earlier last year too, or that was their whole basis for it, was that they were providing the Wii common key, which is also a AES 128-bit encryption key. Yeah, I mean, I think the big takeaway is that emulator developers definitely have to be more careful than what the Yuzu devs were doing with these keys. It's totally legal to develop an emulator with clean room development. In other words, without access to any copyrighted material. But the part where this gets tricky is like Yuzu wasn't providing the keys themselves. However, they were providing instructions to get the keys from your Switch. And the whole argument Nintendo's making now is that you may not have to provide the keys with your emulator, but if the emulator needs them in order to play the games, that is still in violation of DMCA.
And just kind of going back a minute to when we were like, why would the Nintendo settle? They could always make this argument again if next time, right? Like, can always bring another lawsuit, and then if somebody's like, we'll fight you on it, I was like, well, maybe we'll see what happens then. Yeah.
It's also doesn't behoove them to demonize emulation as a concept, given that they profit off of emulation every day. You know, like they use in-house emulators for their own games. NSO is an emulation service. Nintendo, the NES Mini and the Super Nintendo Classic, like those are emulation devices, right? Like obviously they own the rights, or they bought the rights from the publishers of the games that they include in those collections in order to put them out, right? But it's like, you know, they have an entire division in Europe that exists for the purposes of improving their own emulation. So it's like, maybe that's kind of where they wanted to draw the line too. It's like, look, guys, just don't like profit off of our shit. And and Citra going down sucks because like, I don't think that Nintendo wanted to go after Citra. I think it's just when they seized everything from the Yuzu developers, Citra comes along with that. That's collateral damage, right? Hopefully I'm right on this and that they don't want to, they don't care that much about 3DS emulation, because that would be the most petty shit, especially in this coming month when we're about to lose every aspect of any sort of network ability for our 3DS systems.
Yeah, no, I think a key thing that has sort of come in the evolution of emulators is money. So many early emulators were 2-person bedroom projects, and now you have Patreons and you have this crowdfunding that goes into it. And Nintendo's like, hey, you could do this and you can have fun and you can make this, but we don't want you profiting off of our software and our hardware. Like, that's what we're in the business for, making money off these Nintendo games. Why would you dare do that? So I think that comes into play. If you look, like you were saying, there were builds, there was early access behind a Patreon. So like the idea of, if you pay us, you can play these games. That's Nintendo's business model. That shouldn't be an emulator's business model.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that emulator developers get donations or get compensated for their work, I don't think is problematic. I mean, it maybe becomes more so if it's a current system you're developing for, but the fact that people are making money, I don't think should be controversial. And considering the work that emulator developers do is very, very technical and impressive sometimes, I think it's fair. But in the case of Yuzu, like you said, with locking these builds behind Patreon tiers, then it starts to get pretty sketchy. And I think they had to know that they were painting a target on their back.
It was definitely a degree of poking the bear and fucking around, and now they're finding out, right? I mean, it was like, and you're right, it's kind of like the emulation scene has been around for so long, and it's been mostly, the precedent has been that emulation is separate from piracy and it is its own thing. And so I think everybody got really, really comfortable in that. And the reality of the fact that if you ever want to pirate anything or find a ROM for a game, it's not hard. You just Google it, right? It's just like kind of this, like, you know, you see videos are like, of course we don't condone piracy, but if you just search ROM in Google, you'll probably find what you want. You know, it's like we've all kind of taken that for granted and got a little too comfortable with that. And it is probably a good idea to reiterate on things that, like, piracy is illegal. Downloading stuff before it comes out is like, that is an illegal act, you know, because there's no way you could own that thing, right? That said, though, what you just said about people deserve to get paid, I think that's a great point to bring up, Bozo. I think that, like, a lot of work goes into this. And I think that, you know, I think it was one of the, this isn't going to be a great comparison because of who this person is, but one of the founders of the Pirate Bay pitched like a long time ago like modern payment structures for creatives, for homebrew developers and stuff like that, where it's so much more of a personal, you're like subscribing to someone personally for the work that they do and funding their lives. You see that with artists with stuff like Ko-fi or Coffee, personal payment stuff, GoFundMe, Patreons to a certain extent. And I think that stuff is fine, but you just have to be very, very careful on what it is that you're actually giving to people from what they give to you. I think it's like keeping this stuff open source, keeping it crowd sourced, like a lot of this technology, I think is very important. And we can do that without being like, nobody can profit off of work that they do in the emulation scene, hopefully.
Yep. And that's one half of Nintendo's case that the two halves of it that they really needed to secure to make this case was that, for one, they have the means by which the DMCA is being violated with the cryptographic keys needed to play the games on the emulator. And they also, on the other side, have the hard proof that this is being used for piracy and they're profiting off of it, and there's quantifiable damages. And I think that's really why they targeted Yuzu specifically and not Ryujinx in this case, is that Yuzu had that second part where they were making it very, very obvious that this was facilitating piracy with games prior to release, that they had those Patreon locked builds. Had they laid low and not engaged in any of that, I think it would be a different story today. But I think that's the big reason why Nintendo had a case here, was that they had those two halves and could link them together, cause and effect kind of style.
Well, you brought up Ryujinx, which we should mention is the other Switch emulator that is still in existence. And
other than Suyu, which is the fork of Yuzu that is currently out there, which good luck, guys. I don't know. That might be gone by now, for all I know.
Well, I think one thing we could mention, and that kind of spurred this episode onto, is The Verge did a really good article about a number of emulators that kind of have shifted or changed or shut down, and after this news is broken. There's like a DS emulator called Drastic was being sold on the Android store, but is now free. There's Pizza Boy, which is a Game Boy emulator, is been shut down. And then like Ryujinx, apparently on their Discord, they kind of like shut off new people coming on for a while. I'm a member of like a Steam Deck Discord this was actually mentioned in this Verge article, which has like an emulation channel, and they closed that channel. So there's like, whether this stuff is long term, which is something I want to ask everybody here about, there is a feeling of like, hey, maybe we all need to slow down here, or maybe like, or there are people who are involved that are like, it's not worth it, or what have you.
Well, the Nintendo ninjas have infiltrated the Discords. That's like a big part of all this as well, and I think that's why everybody's really paranoid. Is like Nintendo came forth with a shit ton of receipts from the Yuzu Discord of people doing untoward shit and not being above board, right? And so they're like, Nintendo is they've got their spies. It's very Game of Thrones right now.
And if they have enough ammo to launch a lawsuit, not even your DMs are safe. And that's one thing the Yuzu devs would have learned the hard way had this gone to trial, I think.
Right, like that they could subpoena Discord for that kind of information, right?
Totally.
So yeah, I want to get y'all's thought on that. Like, so I know that there's sort of like asterisks to all those emulators I just mentioned that are shutting down, because a lot of them were like, well, we were kind of thinking about doing this anyway, in their statements.
Okay, guys, yeah.
But this spurred them on to do it, if that's true, right? Like, if they were kind of like thinking about shutting it down, well, then they're like, we better do it, right? So I'm kind of curious, what do y'all think? Is it just right now a heightened moment, or does this maybe make people back off, or what's the vibe that y'all are getting?
The vibe I get is that this is temporary, that this is reacting to the moment, getting scared. The $2.4 million figure that gets thrown around for some of these developers, that is lifetime earnings. That's something to be really scared about, getting hammered by the lawsuits. But with the exception really of Citra, which, correct me if I'm wrong, was pretty much the most advanced 3DS emulator on the market,
Totally.
we still have every console that has an emulation scene has its most advanced emulator still out there working on it. No, nothing else is really shut down to the point where that scene is dead. So I think that's important to take into consideration. The state of emulation is strong, is what I would throw out there. But I think a lot of people are scared, and a lot of people, like we previously mentioned, a lot of people are just looking at their models for how they take donations and how they take money and wanting to, and it's good. It's healthy for the scene to sort of reevaluate these things every few years and find out what's the right happy balance to make so that, these developers can be supported without facing legal issues.
Yeah, that definitely, it feels like a bit of a licking your wounds and saving face moment for a lot of people. And I think it probably can't hurt emulation as a whole to see a bunch of people kind of being like, all right, you got the dub on this one. We're going to take it easy for a little bit here. We're going to be respectful of this kind of stuff. We're going to take a step back, take a breather, maybe remove some stuff from the Google Play Store. If you're on Android, it's not fucking hard to download something on your computer and move an APK over to your phone. You don't need it to be on the Play Store. You know what I mean? It's like save a little bit of face, show that you're being respectful for the whole scene, and then kind of start doing things a little bit more above board so that you can actually make those very real arguments for emulation vis-a-vis game preservation, historical, like you're all about, Bozo, is like keeping things like in gaming history available and useful for the future generations. Like there is so many good benefits to emulation that far outweigh piracy and in the reality of why people use this stuff too. Like I personally don't really know anybody. Well, I know some pirates for sure, but the most people that I know that are like emulating Switch games on their Steam Deck or one of these Windows handhelds, they own Switches and they buy Switch games. Like it truly is like, you want to play Tears of the Kingdom on your PC at 4K and 60 frames per second. Like, I think that's great. There are great applications for emulation, both in a modern sense and a historical sense, that I think should be preserved. And it's good to separate that from the bad actors. And if that means taking a step back, taking the L on this one, and then coming back and making that stance, I think that's an important thing.
Yeah, I think this chilling effect will probably be temporary. I agree with what Mike said. I mean, emulation to me falls in the same legal gray area as lockpicks. That's the best analogy, I think, is that, they do have some nefarious uses and a lot of people associate it with that, but the legitimate use case is still there. And it's a very legitimate use case and a very useful one. So, but in terms of this being a new unspoken precedent, I think it'll just, like I said before, cause the emulator devs to really tighten their ships and make sure that they're not rocking the boat and not trying to work off these 20-year-old legal settlements that are already on fragile legal ground. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes in the future. But I think emulation is still going to go pretty strong. It's just devs will have to be more careful and not really imperil their livelihoods like this.
Can we talk about Citra more specifically for a second? Because, obviously we brought this up, but I think that the biggest casualty here is the Citra emulator. I think that, we're moving forward. We're now getting handhelds that have 2 screens coming out, right? It's like the age of 3DS emulation really now should be taking off as Nintendo is sunsetting this console. Same with the Wii U, to be honest. Any dual screen emulation, I think this is a really good time to have really good, solid alternatives for these. I'm talking CMU here as well. Nintendo now owns the code for Citra, right? That is now Nintendo property. Where do we see 3DS emulation going in the future? I mean, obviously Citra was miles ahead. There are other 3DS emulators, but Citra was like in usability. And I mean, there's a Citra release in RetroArch, right? Like, I don't know, have they removed that yet? Or are they planning to? Like, where does all that stand, and where do you guys see 3DS emulation going in the future?
I see it. I mean, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, the Citra source code is out there. So, if people want to fork that and work off of that, I think there'll be some attempts at that. I know forking is always difficult. There's sometimes a lot of momentum, sometimes there's not. But I think yeah, that code is out there. The ideas that they were working on are out there. It'll be interesting who steps up to take that mantle, because it's going to be a difficult step up to be the guys who follow up on that. You have, folks who are working on their own 3DS emulators. Hopefully they can use some of that source code and figure out those ideas and incorporate that into their own projects. It obviously sets things back. How much, how long, are we talking months? Are we talking years? We don't know yet. It's way too soon to judge that. But as long as there are Nintendo consoles, there will be people working on emulating Nintendo consoles. The fandom is there. The desire is there. But it sucks that I don't think we'll reach a mature level until after the system has reached complete end of life. And that's really disappointing that it's going to take longer to get to there than we would have liked.
Right. I haven't followed the 3DS emulation scene too closely, but from my understanding, Citra pretty much was like the go-to 3DS emulator out there. So that's really brutal loss for that scene. But
it's the only one with 2 window support as well, I think, for both of the screens. So it made it really good for things that have multiple monitors. So it's like the only one that you could actually like have that real tangible experience right now. All the other ones are kind of fucked. But yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, at least the final build of it will continue to float around. And I'm sure that maybe even already there's probably new repos being popped up that maybe leverage some of the old source code somehow. But
I just worry that now like Nintendo owns all of their assets, that they'll be able to like make a claim that this is now using our proprietary code. Maybe I'm not a lawyer. Obviously, we've all said that a million times on this fucking episode, but it's like, I worry about that'll be an avenue through which they can be like taking what was open source code, making it proprietary. Have we seen that happen before? I don't know.
I mean, that goes back to the clean room development process, where if the developers can attest that they were developing without the use of any copyrighted material, there's really no way that the companies can definitively prove that.
And the code that is out there right now is under its own open source license. And I don't imagine future ownership can change the previous license that the code was written under. I think that would be the thing that, once again, this would be a legal argument. So I don't know if you want to necessarily be in that legal argument if you're developing.
As Unity was reminded recently, right? Like you can't.
Oh, really? How so?
I mean, when Unity was making all those claims, people were like, well, that you can't do that for previous. You're changing the terms of the license and you can't do that. And so, that was only, so it's like Unity 2024, like a lot of that stuff we learned about, which is obviously shifted, but that was one of the big complaints, is like, you can't change. If I'm working on for Unity 2021 or whatever, that I'm good,
I see.
So like, but I think your point, David, like it's an interesting one though, right? Because Nintendo could make that argument, right? But I don't know if they would win on it. But again, it might just be they have the money to throw around.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's going to be interesting to see what, if anything, happens from here with a younger president at Nintendo, with Shintaro Furukawa, who grew up on Nintendo, who probably, let's get real, has emulated old Game Boy games on his fucking computer from back in the 90s. The dude is not that much, he's not that much older than us, so I think that this will be interesting to see where they land on this, because previous iterations of Nintendo have been litigious since the beginning of the company. I mean, maybe not when they were making playing cards. I don't know I don't know their history in the courts back in the 1800s, but in the video game era, it's like it started. They were known early on as being a super litigious company. So it'll be interesting to see if we see more settlements in this way, if we see it going to court, how much they really want to push into this scene, and then to see if this has ripple effects on any of the other big companies right now. And this is, you've got this here in the notes, but I think there's a few reasons that we don't see as much current gen piracy in other platforms currently. Some of that is technological. Obviously, they have much much more involved systems. A lot of current gen games on other consoles are going to PC, so there's not a reason to emulate if you can just play a PC version on your computer, right? But I think it's a bigger thing of like the industry is trending towards live service and kind of unpiratable games. It's like, how are you going to emulate Fortnite for the PS4 in a PS4 emulator? It's like there's there's no real way if you're connecting to servers and you're playing online and games are all connected to microtransactions and the cloud and all this kind of stuff. Like the rest of the industry is kind of trying to do away with that. Nintendo is still making single player experiences that fit really nicely on an R4 card. You know what I mean? So it's like, I think that's part of why Nintendo is the one that's going after this so much, as they have the most to lose in terms of piracy for current gen. So I don't know. It's just something to think about. And I don't know that I had a question in there for anybody. It was just kind of bloviating.
And they also have the biggest past catalog too out of any of the manufacturers, and that all is affected by emulation should they decide to re-release any of that back catalog.
Yes, right? Like whenever they want to do some collection or something, right? Yeah.
It's just important to know that it's like I am also a big emulation guy. Like I emulate all the time. I emulate on multiple devices. I love that there are devices for emulation now. Like it's such a great future we live in for emulation fans and hobbyists and stuff like that. But I also like buy classic re-releases and collections all the time. Like I love that they go out there and I love that people put work into them. And I love, like I haven't picked it up yet because I've got 50 other fucking games I'm playing right now, but like the Dark Forces remaster, like it looks so good. And like teams going in and like putting in effort to get licenses back and make it available for people to purchase. I really respect that. And I like to support those kinds of releases, as well as I like to play the original Dark Forces. And, I like to play GBA ROM hacks and like, you can do all of it while still supporting the gaming industry. Right.
There's a great example that just came to light the last couple of weeks. Tomb Raider 1, 2, 3 remastered collection came out, and it turns out one of the lead guys on that was working on a project called Open Lara, which was an open source recreation of those classic games. He was doing such a good job that they hired him, and now it's official product that's being sold. So like, I think those are the exciting things that happen in the emulation scene. We don't know how many emulation developers have ended up being hired by these major companies. They typically don't make those announcements. But yeah, I think these are projects of passion. Ultimately, these are all projects of passion. I think a lot of the reason Nintendo is more emulated than other consoles is the passion and devotion that these people have had for Nintendo products going back to their childhood. And so they just gravitate towards that. Also, they're the least secure systems. Let's be clear. And I think that aids in emulation as well.
It's an interesting thought experiment to think about where this would have put emulation had it gone to trial and had all of Nintendo's 5 counts gone upheld by the judge, and instated such a world where having emulators that use these cryptographic keys, not even providing them, but just using them, is in violation of the DMCA, just what that world would look like. And I think at the very least, most modern consoles are modern-ish, so like around 6th or 7th gen, I think, is where these decryption of runtime games actually was started. Mm-hmm. If that became illegal, I think those emulators would have had to at least close up shop until they could figure out some sort of workaround, if any. Yeah, it would be a very dark day for emulation had that happen. But the older consoles, which don't implement such elaborate security measures, I think would be in a much more safer position.
Thank goodness the Dreamcast is what it is. We'll always have the Dreamcast.
Yeah, that's true. Until they release a Dreamcast Classic, and then no more piracy on your Dreamcast. It is funny that it's like how far we've come, because you could just straight up, you could burn CDRs and pop them in that thing, no problem. And it's just like we've gotten a little far. I think it's also important too. It's like we're talking about emulators here. Nintendo also has like major problems within their own system and getting the system hacked and playing pirated games on actual real hardware and not emulating the hardware, right? So it's like Nintendo has always been in a war against pirates. They've kind of always had a lot to lose. I think they have overshot in order to make enemies, and it's made them a target for people that feel hurt by that and want to get back at them. And it's kind of been like, a war between Nintendo and the scene groups, like forever, right? So I think that this is separate from that, and I think that it's important to know that my hope and my wish and my positivity says that Nintendo is aware of the difference between emulation and piracy, and I really think that they do. And hopefully this was them showing restraint, and not starting an all-out war on the entire thing. Because I do think if the worst was to happen, we could be having a very different conversation a few years from now. But this is just, the games industry will have to pivot in ways for the future of technology, regardless of what happens. Every other entertainment industry has had to adapt as technology has changed. It's people will always trend towards convenience, right? So hopefully everybody can go away with this with a new game plan, new action items. Let's make emulation more above board. Maybe Nintendo makes their stuff a little bit easier to access things that everybody wants to access in the first place, and everybody's happy. How's that for wrapping it up with an optimistic bow?
Well said, sir. Yeah. Well said.
Awesome. Well, that's going to do it then for our discussion today on emulation. We're going to take another short break, and when we come back, we'll be chatting about the games that we've been playing recently. I don't know that I've been playing a whole lot of new games to talk about. I guess I'll just mention real briefly that I've been playing more Astro Duel. Been playing it with my kid, played it with my cousin. And then, I also, we already talked about the Princess Peach game, and I've also been playing some Splatoon for the big run. But I know we're going to maybe talk about that more too. So that's me. Been mostly playing some of the same games I've been talking about the last few weeks.
There's a lot of crossover I'm noticing this week between all the games we've been playing. So I'll save some of the ones that I've been playing for y'all to talk about. But I will quickly say Picross S+, I've been playing, been really enjoying Balatro, and Penny's Big Breakaway I rolled credits on last night. So I've now completed the game. I think I'm like 75% is my completion right now. I still have more collectibles to pick up during it, and then there's also all the time trials, which I haven't really touched yet, but there's a few like extra things. But I'll save some of that for coming up, not to spoil who's been playing Penny's Big Breakaway. But games I'd like to talk about. One would be Splatoon 3 Big Run. I haven't played a Big Run or a Salmon Run in a while. Did play some of that today, just because I'm kind of reinvigorated on Splatoon after the DLC drop. That roguelike DLC is just so good, and I prefer that to Salmon Run. And playing Big Run today made me realize how much more I really like the side order roguelike mode than I do enjoy Salmon Run. But I did have some good times. It was mostly me just dying horribly, but I did have one victory. So I wanted to give a little bit of shout out to that. How have you been doing in this Big Run so far, Patrick?
I've only gotten a chance to play today because we had a busy weekend, and this is Sunday, so it's the end of it. Maybe I'll squeeze in a few more. Pretty well. Played some with my son, and my rank is a little too high, and I was like, I should go rank myself down. He's like, no, don't. And we lost a bunch. And
you ranked yourself down.
And we ranked ourselves down, and then we started doing better. And so that's one of my ranking problems with the games I like to play with him, and then I always have to de-rank myself to make it palpable.
As someone who is friends with people who are 10,000 points higher than me in Mario Kart, I understand your pain. Yeah.
So anyway, I got the bronze pretty quickly, which you got to get 85 eggs to do. And so hopefully I'll get some more. I actually really like Eeltail Alley for this. I think it's an interesting map.
Feels very claustrophobic to me. But, yeah. I mean, there's good areas on the side for you to escape to if you've hit your quota and you just need to wait out the rest of the. That's what I've started to do. I've just been running away like a cow.
That's a great early salmon run strat. I think it's big. Yeah.
And then lastly, game I want to talk about is actually a Playdate game I picked up a game for my Playdate. I bought it. It was on sale. This game is called Skew, and it is a super cool game. Friend of mine on Twitter put out this game, and he kind of co-made it with one of the main developers of the game Toy Commander for the Dreamcast, which was one of my favorite Dreamcast games. And I saw that, and I was like, I got to pick this up. It's a super fun game that uses the crank and the tilt. I always forget that there's a gyroscope in the Playdate, but it's a really fun, like, corridor kind of helicopter type game. You got to crank to stay up in the air, or crank down to decelerate, and then you go left and right. It's kind of like an infinite corridor thing, but it's super fun. I've been having a good time, and it's just got me turning on my Playdate again and realizing all the games I have in that season that I haven't yet played, and I've been enjoying that. But there's a big Playdate sale going on right now, and it's cool to support weirdo games like that. How about y'all? What games have you been playing recently?
I've been playing a lot of Balatro. I don't know if y'all have spoken about it in previous weeks, but this game has taken my soul and the souls of many other people. It is a poker roguelike where, you know, numbers go up, but to infinity, and there's all sorts of ways that it skews and plays around with the game of poker. It is not a gambling game, no matter what the EU marketing people say. But it's fantastic, and it's just been sucking my hours out of me. And then the other game that's, you know, 100-hour game is easily. I've been playing a lot of Persona 3 Reload. I'm a huge Persona fan. Finally excited to be playing the third one with all like the quality of life that Persona 5 Royal brings to the table. Just another great RPG in a year stacked full of great RPGs. And then I don't have it on here, but I want to give a shout out. I won't be able to play it till later on this year, but Unicorn Overlord, really looking forward to playing from Vanillaware.
Yeah, quickly, just to talk about Balatro. Holy fucking shit, this game is so good and so fun and just so addicting. Like I'll play until like 4 a.m. in bed, and I'm like, what the fuck am I doing right now?
It's impacting my marriage. It is impacting my marriage.
Yeah, I won my first run on stream and was like, oh no, I'm hooked. And it was like and also I streamed for like 4 hours that day, and I usually don't stream that long, and so it was just kind of like, oh the time has gone by. Yeah, anyway, very dangerous if that thing ever comes to Switch.
Oh, but it's on Switch.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh shit, I thought it was only on Steam. That's fucking all right. Good luck, everybody. What about you, Bozo? What have you been playing recently?
I have also rolled credits on Penny's Big Breakaway, as you were hinting at, David. I also hit 100% on it. Went through and got all the coins and the mini missions. But yeah, it just scratches all the itches for me and everything I like in a 3D platformer. There's so much shared DNA with Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, more than any of like the 3D platformers like Mario Sunshine or any of the rare games. And it really just feels almost something like Treasure. What Treasure would have put out had they been more active in like the Xbox 360 era.
The character design feels very Mischief Makers, I think.
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally. Penny looks like ripped straight from that game. Mm-hmm. But yeah, this is honestly like the kind of game I want to see more of in the games industry. It's like that meme, smaller scope. Devs are paid more to produce less. Yeah. About 12 hours of content with tons of room for replayability.
I'm curious, Bozo, did you have trouble with the controls? That's the one like thing that's been holding me back. And I know David said that he switched controls halfway through or whatever. What did you stick with?
Or it's after like the first couple hours.
After a little bit. Did you stick with the developer intended weird controls?
With the right analog stick?
Is that what it is?
Well, I ended up using the buttons for most of the yo-yoing. I only use the stick if I need to like shoot the yo-yo behind me or something for whatever reason, or if I need to do the spin move. But it took some learning. It's definitely a learning curve, but once you get the hang of it, it's very, very fluid. I do wish you could remap the spin move so that you could just have the stick do the spin move instead of it having to do all the other inputs at the same time, because that move is like critical for extending combos sometimes.
Yeah, and it's hard to land it by spinning the stick around. It's like I'll do it to keep the combo going, but then it stops my combo, and I'm like, I should have just gone into a roll or whatever, right? But yeah, that game is sublime. Like it's once you get down the controls, you feel really, really, really nice. It's like it's got the way I have been describing it is it feels like Super Mario 3D World, a little bit of Kirby's Forgotten Land, those style of 3D game where they're kind of, almost like corridor platformers, maybe you could call them. But it's got the cap from Mario Odyssey, basically, like that kind of extended movement in the air. And then obviously mixed with Tony Hawk, like you said. So if that sounds good to you, man, that's hitting all the fucking buttons for me, dog. I love it.
Very nice. Well, I think that's going to do it for this episode then. Thank you so much, Michael Domangue and Bozo. Thank you both very much for coming on and sharing your knowledge and expertise in this area with us. And thanks to milkyway.co, who does our website, and thanks to Corduroy, who does our music. If you're looking for me, Patrick, you can find me most places online as PDYX, and my games company, One Frog Games.
I'm pretty much ever on the internet at Monolith Fiji. And what about y'all? If people want to find you guys online, where can they find you?
I am on private everywhere where you can find me on social media at mdomaing. Feel free to send me an invite.
And I am Bozo. I'm mostly on the Discord, but I'm also on GitHub with Infinite Blue GX. Yeah, I don't have much else to plug. I'm in the Lost Media Wiki. You can find me there if you want to help search for Slamfest 99. But yeah.
Yeah, this is a call to action, folks. If you know anything about this long lost Nintendo Super Smash Brothers event from the 90s, please hit up Bozo. Hit us up and we'll pass the message along. Godspeed to you and all your efforts there. And also, of course, special thanks to all our patrons on Patreon. We appreciate you guys so much. If you'd like to find our show on social media, we are at Switch Headz on Twitter, at Super Switch Headz on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. We got our website, switchheadz.com, and we've got our Patreon. Make sure you visit those. We'll have links to those in the description of the show. We've also got our Facebook group and our Discord. Our Discord is such a wonderful community. It's been great having you guys specifically in the Discord to enlighten us on a lot of the ongoing stuff with Yuzu that's been going on, and that's why we wanted to have you on the show. So thank you guys so much, and please join us over in the Discord so you can see the sparks of ideas that end up becoming episodes right here on Super Switch Headz. It's just a boiling pot of creativity and a love for video. But that's going to do it for this episode, gang. God bless the emulator developers. We're going to be back next week with another great episode. Can't wait for that. Later this month, we're also going to be doing an episode on Princess Peach Showtime. So stick around and see if our opinions change on that after playing the demo. But other than that, that's going to do it for this episode, gang. You guys know the drill. Be safe out there. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to one another. Go download the last version of Yuzu, I guess, because that's the last one you're going to get. Other than that, folks, we love you guys very much. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.